This afternoon, I present my thesis on the political elite of Nigeria, its paradoxes and continuity. The question may come to mind as to what motivated me to study the political elite. I left Nigeria as an adult 20 years ago for Brazil, where I currently work as a lecturer. Family ties took me back home often. Over the years, I observed that nothing much has changed in my country. This prompted me to study the political elite. Its presence, or rather, its absence in terms of the country's development. Admittedly, the political elite of Nigeria is often faulted for ineffective government policies. However, it is less well understood in terms of the powers and roles it assumed over the development of the polity since colonial rule. Quite often and exhaustively, the quest for explanations for our lack of development has been confined to external factors, such as colonial legacies or post-colonial interventions. The questions that immediately come to mind are: how long shall we continue to mourn colonialism and its legations while we perish under poverty and misery in our own land? For how long shall we continue to fault external forces for our predicaments as if we have no iota of capacity to improve the social conditions of our people? This study neither addresses these problems, nor does it assume that external variables are unimportant to internal development. The study simply sought a break from the usual focus of research on external factors of impediments to national and international development. My study is concerned with the character, composition, and circulation of Nigeria's post-colonial core political executive elite over successive political regimes and with changing sources and levels of government revenue. The core political executive elite, as the object of study, is the only power that since the post-colonial period has survived in the policy-making role, while others have either become functionally weak or grown extinct. Core political executive elite in this study designates the key formal and most visible participants in the decision-making processes of the Nigerian government, such as the President or Head of State and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, Vice President, Prime Minister, Minister, and members of the military junta. Based on the observation that most colonial literature is relatively dispersed or disorganized, the research was equally motivated by the need to contribute towards filling a gap in our knowledge of the Nigerian state. It was thus driven by the intent to clarify the nature of Nigerian state elite and broadly its implications for Nigeria's political regimes since colonial rule. The main research question is how the composition and circulation of the core political executive elite can be characterized against the background of changes in the political regime and economic resources over time in post-colonial Nigeria. The study departs from the critical elite theories to analyze and reveal not just the occupancy of political executive offices, but also the social background from which the political elite rulers hail. While the approach does not consider social changes impossible, it emphasizes the shared preferences of political leaders, reflects on the similarities of social background and interactions that limit changes, and points to the importance of elite transformation through the renewal of ideas and interest amid changing circumstances. For the methodology, the study builds on a longitudinal analysis of political elite background and interactivities. The choice for longitudinal analysis of social background and interactivities of the elite is justified by the historical outlook of the study. The methodology also permitted the consideration of structural factors, mainly political and economic conditions, as emphasized not just by liberal adepts inclined to underline the role of economic development prerequisites, but also by Marxist literature, which stresses the unique role of economic factors in determining economic elite orientations towards state power. Thus, structural changes are relevant in the study because they make possible the recognition of periodic changes in political regime and economic resources that since colonial rule were expected to alter and coherently steer elite conduct towards political objects, particularly authority and responsibility. Having explained the motivations, the object and research goals, I will now focus on the 4 key findings of my study. First, it was found that common backgrounds limit elite participation and continuity in political executive offices. Amid changing circumstances since decolonization, there has been a great deal of continuity in power and roles of the core political elite in Nigeria. That is, as observed from the social background data of the core political executive since independence, there has been no major shift in the characteristics of high political executive office holders. Status background, that is relating to age groups, ethnicity, religion, and region, were found to blend with formal educational, business, and political background in gaining and retaining access to political executive offices since colonial rule. Thus, participation in key political executive offices has been limited to individuals and groups of similar status and social class background. Extended stay in political offices, that is the office longevity, often claimed by the political executive to consolidate proclaimed social policies, were not observed to be a limit to the fierce and sometimes bloody disputes over political succession since colonial rule. Second, the study reveals that interactive devices such as networks ensure political executive recirculation and continuities in office. Political party organizations are found to perpetuate a self-serving power network that facilitates the cohesion of the political class. This supports the accessibility and permanence of the elite in political executive offices. Data about affiliations to political parties and participation in political executive offices show that access to and retention of political executive power and roles are mostly shared among the members of the majority ethno-regionally based political parties. That is, elite participation in political executive offices through political party affiliation has been linearly and hierarchically based on ethnic morphology and network interactions. In particular, considering that no opposition party has ever won elections since colonial rule, it follows that the emergence and development of informal networks hinge on winning parties whose identities and memberships can be traced back to the structure and leadership of the majority ethnic groups. Moreover, the ethnic patterns of political party identities and memberships since colonial rule indicate that a self-serving elite network in Nigeria is associated with the resources and personalities of particular political parties and their membership. Therefore, elite dynamics were thus found to operate by harnessing informal network resources to formal institutions, such as political parties and the presidency. Powers and roles at the presidency are converted through patronage, cooptation, and corruption to protect special interests and avoid accountability. Third, the research reveals a dysfunctional elite composition that inhibits true regime change. An important observation on the relationship between the character of the core political executive elite and the political system is that no significant regime change has in fact occurred since colonial rule, despite myriad institutional changes and crises. This finding invalidates, in the Nigerian case, the arguments of regime change theorists who associate severe social crisis with renewals in elite composition and political regime change. There have been abrupt, brutal, and momentous crises in the Nigerian polity. Yet the political system, as demonstrated in this study, with the use of literature sources and Freedom House data on political rights and civil liberties, shows no significant change. Based on the character of the core political executive elite, no noticeable changes have occurred from a closed regime such as colonial and military rule to an open, especially democratic regime. The fourth finding is that special interests underline power and role continuities. Common social background combined with the creation of informal networks and mostly shared attitudes that translate to interests, commonalities, explain the composition and continuity of political executive offices. The typical attitudes, namely rent-seeking, patronage, corruption, coercion, ethnic, and godfather politics, were found to characterize the composition of the political executive elite and imply bad public policies. That is, the socially unrepresentative elite preferences that manifest at the executive office level substantially restrict political liberties and civil rights. These preferences were analyzed here in terms of the vested interests that tend to dominate the attitudes and behavior of those charged with the public responsibility to initiate, supervise, and deliver policies in post-colonial Nigeria. Therefore, it is seen that the preferences of the core political executive elite have historically responded more to the necessities, anxieties, and avarice of the Nigerian political class than to the legitimate demands of the Nigerian masses. The undermining of public preferences stems from the insecurity and phobia overtly and continually felt by the post-colonial Nigerian elite. In a seeming response to such insecurity and fear, the elite has resorted to socially willful attitudes and practices such as rent-seeking, patronage extendis, corruption, manipulation, cooptation of select members of society, and use of force to maintain political executive power. This finally brings me to the main conclusion of the study. Paradoxes and continuities mark political executive elite composition and character since colonial rule in Nigeria. In a more intriguing manner, the observed pattern of elite flows in political executive offices contradicts the liberal pluralist assumption of power diffusion. At first, the diverse social backgrounds observed in political offices of the country seem in agreement with the idea of cross-cutting power inclusion proposed by the liberal pluralists. But a closer look at the composition and character of the political executive elite revealed a cohesive group of carefully selected persons from a common social background and network of political class members. To conclude, I can say that the paradox marks the relationship between the circulation and characteristics composition of the core political elite, resulting in impeded